going to make up a porter style beer, which is a dark beer, which is full of sort of burnt caramel, chocolatey flavours. And the basis of this is malted barley. Sort of got some here in my hands. It smells wonderful, and basically it's being kiln dried and malted off to sort of produce sort of the sugar content in the grain. And basically what we're going to do, we're going to extract this sugar, the maltose, in a thing called a mash. And basically all the mash is the barley mixed with water at a certain temperature and held for a certain amount of time. Right then, first stage for mashing is you need to heat the water. Basically you have two temperatures for the mash. You heat your water to the strike temperature, which is a temperature that you want before you put your grain into the mash. And basically in this case we're looking for about 70 degrees. Once you chuck the grain into the water, that'll lower the temperature by 2 or 3 degrees. And then that achieves our mash temperature, which we're looking for something between 66 and 68 degrees Celsius, because of the style of beer we're doing. We want a fairly high-end mash because of the dark beer. We want to extract as much of the colour and the sugars and the malt as possible out of the grain that we've got. So basically once it reaches 70 degrees, thermometer, always a handy device, don't use your fingers. So in it goes. And you just give it a good stir as well, give it a mix so you don't get any hot spots or cold spots. You can always add hot water or cold water into the mash, sort of when you pitch your grain in, to achieve the temperature that you want. So that's all good. So we're just cooking up to 70 now, and this is pretty much ready to go. Okay, so the final part of the mash is actually putting it into what we call a mash tun. And what we've got here is two 20-litre buckets that we've turned into a fairly basic mash tun. You've got your bottom bucket with a valve in the bottom so you can extract the liquid out of it once the mash is finished. And we've got a second 20-litre bucket which sits in top, and in the bottom of it we've drilled a whole set of small holes, and basically it creates a false bottom. And what that does is it means that the grain bed will sit in the top one, and then you put that into the bottom one, and it basically means that you can bring your wort off the bottom here, which is just the liquid, without getting all the grains in. And once the grain bed settles, once you've drained some of the wort off, it basically acts as a filter, and that gets rid of all the bits and pieces that you don't really want. And once you've got your grain and your water in here to create your mash, you basically need to keep them at a constant temperature, and we're going to be mashing for about 90 minutes. So basically the easiest way to do that is to wrap them up with some blankets, stick a lid on them, and occasionally just keep coming back and sticking the thermometer in to see what the temperature is. A lot of people will convert eskies to this purpose because it's essentially a pre-insulated box, and if you can get one with a tap in it, so much the better. Yeah, you just put a false bottom in and away you go, and that's it. Just checking the temperature of the water in the mash tun to make sure we're at our optimum strike temperature, which is 70 degrees or just below. You don't want to have a strike temperature too high. Once you get past, I think, about 73 degrees Celsius, the extraction of sugars from your grain stops, and basically fixes it. So if your strike temperature is too high, it just doesn't work. Okay, we're now going to pitch the crushed grain into the mash tun, and when you tip it in, just tip it in slow and steady. It's always good to have someone else with a big spoon, like Miles here, to give it a stir. Basically you want to get a good consistency, you don't want any lumps, you want a good mix, and you want it to end up like sort of a really thick, stiff porridge kind of stuff, and that's where you're at. Okay, so here we go. And it smells bloody wonderful as well. Right, I'm just going to pop some lids on him. We've got two lids because we've got a couple of different size buckets. So we're going to lid him, and then we're going to wrap him up in some blankets to keep him warm, and we're going to mash for 90 minutes. We've achieved a mash temperature of 65 degrees, which is absolutely perfect. And that's the end of this particular stage of the brew. Again, this is a second lid around the outside, and that'll help to keep the temperature fairly constant. So I'll get Miles to give me a hand here. and we're going to lift him over to the other bench and wrap him up in some blankets. Okay, we've wrapped our mash up to keep him at a constant temperature, and the time is now 9:30, so at 11 o'clock, in an hour and a half's time, we'll carry on. The mash has had its time and it's nearly ready, and we've got some water heating for the next process. In the meantime, just going weighing out some of the more specialised grain for the boil process. We've got some black patent malt here, which is really nice and dark, and we've got some chocolate. And the weight of grain in the mash was about 5.5 kilos. And for sort of grain that are going in for colour and flavour, you roughly want about 10%. So we're just going to weigh that out, ready for the next stage. Okay, we're going to unwrap the mash tun here, and basically we're going into the next stage of the process, which is called sparging. And basically, sparging is running hot water through the grain bed in the mash to rinse off the grain and sort of get as much of the sugar out of the grain as possible into the liquid, which is the wort. So that's it really. Your sparging water needs to be quite hot. So we've got a sparge water temperature here of 75 degrees, and that basically fixes the sugar and stops that sort of extraction process. And basically, when you start your sparge, the first 2 or 3 litres, which are called the first runnings, once you drain them off, you want to tip them back in the top. So once the grain bed is settled, it acts like a filter. So that stops all the bits of chaff and stuff that's in there getting into your wort. So when you start the process, take your first 2 or 3 jugfuls and just chuck them back in the top.